We have Mr. Elliot Serrano joining us today. He's moderating our panel. He's a frequent contributor to Red Eye.
Chicago Red Eye.
Chicago Red Eye and Playboy.com. And you've got chops all over the place, too. Comic book world as well.
I had a run on the Adventures of Grumpy Cat comic book, which, when they asked me if I wanted to do the book, I thought, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. And then when I saw the book, I was like, this is brilliant. This is wonderful. And it ends up, it sells as much as Harry Potter now. Yeah. No royalties, though. Horrible agent. Horrible agent. I was my own agent.
So we'll definitely learn about how to write in the voice of Grumpy Cat from you.
It's terrible.
But I'll let you take it away, Elliot. Thank you, and thank you all for coming out.
And I'm really very honored to be a part of this because I'm getting to share the stage up here, be up here on stage with some really, really talented folks who have made some significant contributions to the world of comedy, especially here in Chicago and abroad. If I could pass off to you, Jessica.
Yes, I am Jessica Hardy, and I'm the founder and festival director of the Chicago Comedy Film Festival.
I'm Scott Dikkers. I am one of the founders of The Onion, and before that I was a cartoonist. And over the years I've made a couple of comedy films that were sold for distribution. I optioned a screenplay, written a few books about how to write comedy, and I run a program at the Second City now to teach people to write prose humor.
How do I follow that? I'm Erica Watson. I'm a stand-up comedian, and in my head, I'm a stripper named Pound Cakes.
I'm already throwing down.
Yes.
I'm already throwing it.
I love singles. But in real life, I do stand-up, and I'm a contributor on Windy City Live on Channel 7 and The Jam, and I'm also an actress. I'm on the show The Shy on Showtime. I play a character named Miss Tiny.
Nice.
No pun intended.
Took me a moment.
Yes, yeah.
Took this moment. So I guess we'll get some of the real, frequently asked general stuff out of the way first, right? Because we have a lot of folks here who are learning they're learning the craft, and they want to learn some of the craft from you all. So consider you're sitting down and you're about to write a script. You have a story in mind. It's a comedy, obviously. What are some of the first considerations when you sit down to write your script? How do you look at it? Are you someone who thinks, I have all these great jokes that I can string together and find a plot to weave them together? Or do you think, I've got this plot and I need the jokes to come from that?
Okay.
Anyone.
I guess my first approach is always, okay, this is the story I want to tell, and do I really feel like I know this topic well enough? And do I feel like I can write these characters honestly? And that really is probably true for screenwriting in general, but even with comedy, it just needs to come from a place of genuine understanding of what you're writing. Not necessarily how many jokes I can tell on this topic or problem or plot.
Yeah, so I would back up to the previous step. To me, the most important part is, before you've written anything, selecting the idea that you're going to write about. I feel like that's critical. Most people writing a screenplay for the first time pick the wrong idea. They pick an idea that's not high concept enough, or it's too complicated. They can't pitch it in an elevator. Because if you ever sell a screenplay, they're going to be buying essentially the idea. They're going to totally rewrite it. Meet the Parents is a great cautionary tale. You should all look up what happened with Meet the Parents. Independent film produced here in Chicago. Movie studio saw it and were like, oh, that's a good idea. Let's make it with Robert De Niro, Ben Stiller, the whole deal. And the poor guy who made the independent film was written out of the deal. He didn't get anything. He got like $200,000. And they just bought the rights to everything. This guy couldn't even come to the set and meet the actors. He was just cut out because they just wanted the idea. It didn't even matter that he'd written a screenplay and even made the film. So if you're just dealing with a screenplay, just know that your most important asset is a great idea. A high concept idea that an executive is going to go, it's exactly the movie we're looking for. Let's get somebody real to write it now. So, but if you write a screenplay that has a good concept and you sell it, that's great. Write another one and learn from that experience and keep going. But to answer your question, so sitting down, the first thing I would do is write a treatment. I'd write like a 2 to 5 page prose outline of the whole story, beginning to end. So I know exactly what's going to happen. I know the whole plot. That's another area I think 99% of all screenwriters fall short on. They don't know their story before going in, and there's no structure. And 99.9% of screenplay, I'll use that percentage a lot tonight, of screenwriters will write a script that just meanders. And you read it, and you're at page 10, page 20, nothing's happened yet. And any executive reads a script like that, it just goes right in the trash. You need to have an inciting incident by page 10 at least. You need to have plot complications. You need to get hooked. You need to get pulled into the story. You want to know more. Most screenplays don't have any of that. So if you can write it all out in 2 to 5 pages and have all those hooks and be able to read that 2 to 5 pages to somebody and keep them gripped while you're telling it, then you're ready to write the screenplay. Then you sit down and you've got a blueprint and you can start writing the scenes. Writing scenes is easy. We can all write scenes. I've never seen bad scenes in a screenplay. We all hear people talk. We all know how people talk. It's the easiest part. Just don't get seduced into thinking that's how you write a screenplay. Sit down, blank computer, start writing dialogue. Worst thing you can do, in my opinion.
I think I've seen scripts when you can tell the person that wrote it had a bunch of jokes that they just wanted to get off and figure out a way how to put those funny jokes in a story. It even happens with comedians. There are people that just have punchlines or they know there's something funny they want to say, that they backtrack and figure out what situation they can put that story in to make the punchline work. And those never work and they're awful. For me, piggybacking off of what he said, in addition to knowing what story you want to tell, sometimes I just start off with a character. And that character doesn't have to be necessarily a person. There's a sitcom I'm writing right now, and the character is a drug rehab facility in Inglewood. And when I visited it, I was like, this is a fucking character. The whole place in itself, the way in which people interact, the way they greet each other, the crackheads standing out front, or people in the line meant to get their whatever. Yeah, you've been there, girl. Okay. But I was like, this whole building, this whole space, this energy in itself is a character. And I want to write about this place. And then from that, I started developing, well, who are the people that are here? Sometimes even when I'm writing, if I'm somewhere sitting in a restaurant by myself and I see a person and they're interesting to me, I will make an entire world around that random person. And just try to think, I'm like, what is his life like? Where has he been? Where does he come from? What makes him laugh? Is he good in bed? If he's not, why? Like, to figure out all those things. And then sometimes there have been times when I'm like, I get a story out of that. I'm a little weird. I don't follow rules as much. I went to film school. I thought I was going to be a director. I don't know how I ended up being a comedian who strips in her mind. But I think that they're different. Sometimes you don't have to follow the rules. Sometimes things come to you magically, and it's a gift that's given to you from the universe, so ride with it. But treatments are so important. And even for me, writing sitcoms and writing scripted series, a show Bible is very important. And that's why when I am working on a screenplay, sometimes I go ahead and craft the world. Before I even write the treatment, I write out the characters and what this world is and what are the rules of this particular universe. What's the pay to play here? And that's how I get things started. If what I said makes any sense, I hope it did.
That makes sense to me.
Okay.
Which actually brought me to the next bit, because I'm looking forward to a sitcom at a drug rehab center. But where is it? And Scott, you can speak to this too, because The Onion kind of like these days, especially with the way humor has evolved, especially how humor is a commentary on society. Where is it where you decide this is where I can make a joke about this? I can set comedic situations in a place like this, or I can make a joke about this particular situation. These days, let's say things kind of like a rolling trash fire, right? So we're like, how do we find the humor, especially with how comedy is evolving? Like, where do you say, I'm sitting down, I want to come up with what's funny about this? Are there parameters? Are there borders? Are there lines I shouldn't cross? There are a lot of comedians who say there's no such thing as a line, that you should be able to if there's a line, you should cross over it. But then there are others who, like the audience, that'll disagree, right, Jessica?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh, you're going to make me answer that first?
Well, you're going like this.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about it because it just reminded me, because I knew that question was coming, and then I just now remembered that we had a documentary about Andy Dick in our festival last year that we pulled because he had been sexually harassing people. Mm. And so that really speaks to this topic. And then I was thinking, The Onion does a fantastic job, obviously, of approaching those topics in a way that you can laugh at things. And, I do think that there are just certain things that we have to draw a line. I mean, it's just the nature of where we're at. But if you're going to poke at something, you better be really funny. You better be really funny. You better be good at it. That's my answer. I don't know.
Yeah, so there is a line. There's definitely a line. And The Onion has crossed it a few times and gotten in big trouble. And I have sort of a businessy response to that question. And that is, it depends on the medium that you're in. So if you're writing a blog or if you're doing a humor, newspaper parody publication like The Onion, you can say anything you want. You can make fun of anybody, and people might get mad. They might try to sue you. They'll send you cease and desist letters or whatever. But the written word is kind of a sacred thing. Sacred, but also pathetic, because so few people read it. It's like the least popular medium. Film, on the other hand, is one of the most popular. It's certainly the most expensive, and it takes big money to make a film. Don't do controversial jokes or material in a film. Nobody's going to release it. Nobody's going to buy it. Every few years a movie comes out that's like satirical, let alone offensive. Offensive, you have there was that movie where they were going to kill Kim Jong-un. What was that? Interview. So once in a rare while, you get a movie like that, and the studio's computers are hacked by the North Koreans. I mean, it's a disaster for them. They don't want that. They do not want. They want safe, palatable, general audience entertainment that's going to make them a lot of money. So that's not the place to stand on your soapbox. Start a blog. Write a book. You can say anything you want in a book. That's the best time to try to cross lines. But in terms of making the humor acceptable, say you're in front of an audience and you want to get laughs as opposed to, jeers, don't punch down. You can make fun of power, you can make fun of authorities, you can make fun of elites. You can't make fun of the homeless, any oppressed minority group, anybody who's, hurt or down. You just can't do it. Audiences don't find it funny. And this is one of the big reasons why there's no right-wing Daily Show, or why there's literally no right-wing satire at all, because
they're not funny.
Well, it's not that they're not funny. It's not that they're not funny. It's that they punch down. So they make fun of, Hillary Clinton's their big target now. Does she have any power? She's kind of one of the elites, but she literally is just a citizen at this point. She should not be the focal point of humor right now. If she had gotten elected, I'd be all over that. I'd be making fun of her every day. Now we have to go after Trump. So the other thing is they blame welfare queens. They blame immigrants. They're blaming the people at the bottom of the strata for all problems. And regardless of whether the audience is right or left, they don't find that funny. They're never going to laugh at picking on somebody who's already down. So that's kind of the line, really, as far as I see it.
As a comedian, I hate to say that there is a line, because I want to believe that we can talk about whatever we want to, but like she said, make sure it's funny. I will say that it also depends on the character that's doing it and how the audience goes on the ride with them. There's certain things that a person that looks like me might be able to get away with and say, to mess with somebody because I'm a fat girl and I'm a black girl and I can give you sister girl, and my character in the movie can probably say some off-color shit that people will be like, well, she's right, but a person that looks like him saying the same exact thing, they'd be like, hell no, he's wrong.
And an interesting thing about that is in writing, they can't tell which of us wrote the joke.
Right, exactly.
So you then have to be careful in print.
Exactly. And there's a movie, Barbershop, I don't know exactly which barbershop, but a comedian, Cedric the Entertainer, his character was an old surly man in a barbershop, and he cracked some off-color jokes about Dr. Martin Luther King. And people were so upset about what he was saying, but then they're like, but he got away with it because it's the funny character that's an angry old black man that can tell you that some things that went on in the civil rights movement, some of it was good and some of it was some bullshit. He basically, I believe the character talked about Dr. King was a philanderer and had a lot of women. And you don't talk about that. You don't, just Coretta Scott King was still living. You don't say nothing bad about Dr. Martin Luther the King, right? But even if the writer felt that way and was on some kind of soapbox, he was able to slip it in because you give it to the character that people can go on that ride with them. So it's a tricky thing, but I know we see all the time in movies where the sassy girl like me can get away with doing things that is what everybody's thinking, but they dare not say it because then it'll come off in a wrong way. So it's just, do it, but make sure the right character has the fun with it. And some things probably, if you just don't know, you should probably just leave it alone. I have a stand-up routine about me going to get an abortion. And off top, I know you all looking at me like, what? But the situation was so weird and crazy that audiences go on that ride because a girl that looks like me typically does not give her abortion story on stage. Now, and it's a really crazy story. But there was a time when I had the joke since I started comedy. I tried it out in my first 3 years of comedy and it bombed every time and people hated me. Now, 13, 14 years in, I'm a different person. I'm mature enough to make that joke work and people are dying laughing. So it also depends on your maturity as a writer, I think, when you're ready to handle certain things and when you're not. Don't do it too soon because you don't want to do that. But when you can get an audience to go on that ride with you, but you have to do it the right way, and it needs to be funny as hell.
I also wanted to add to that. You can get perilously close to picking on the wrong target, someone you're punching down at, as long as the actual target of your humor is the power elites. For example, just worked on this headline today for a story. Quote, this is the headline. Quote, "We mustn't abandon civil discourse," unquote, cries child torn from mother's arms. So the joke there is making fun of the elites in Washington who are talking civilly about tearing children from their parents. But it gets perilously close. It almost seems like, wait, they're making fun of a child? Well, they can't do that, can they? No, because the subtext is very clear there.
Okay, so that kind of, I'm going to start veering this way because it makes me think of what happened recently with Sarah Huckabee Sanders at the press correspondence dinner, where a comedian whose name escapes me right now.
Michelle.
Thank you, Michelle. She made the smoky eye joke, which was, again, she wasn't punching down. No. She wasn't even making fun of her appearance.
Nope.
But within the talk around it, it got, what's the word, hijacked, co-opted, whatever. It was made into something else.
Yeah.
So my question now is this. Is that another line you have to consider yourself on? Like, I can see this joke getting hijacked and being made to represent this instead.
Can you, for those of us who aren't familiar, can you maybe elaborate on what?
So it was, I'm going to ruin the joke but it was essentially that Michelle said that Sarah Huckabee Sanders was able to take burns lies and takes the ashes to to create the perfect smoky eye, like uses it as a eyeshadow. Does this wonderful smoky eye. Actually complimenting the way she looks. Like, oh, you've got a great smoky eye there, but mind you, it is made of the ashes of the lies you tell. You know, so again, everything. Punching up, not insulting, actually being complimentary, but again, it got hijacked. And then on top of that, I was like, oh, how could she have said that? How could she have insulted her appearance? It was so vulgar. That can happen. Is that a concern?
No. Short answer. There's been complaints about political correctness on the left for so long, but there's so much more on the right now. Because you can't make fun of Sarah Huckabee Sanders because then you're anti-feminist. I mean, they're like making up these absurd excuses for why you can't make fun of people in power now. So I wouldn't worry about that at all. Like some people are going to complain. Let them have their made-up complaints. In the long term, so I look at it from like a brand perspective. Something like The Onion, it's been around for 30 years. We've crossed the line a lot. Usually we don't. People remember the times that it was funny and that it didn't offend them. They forget about the times that it offended a bunch of people. And so over the years, you get this reputation of being fearless. Like, oh, they'll make fun of anybody. But that's just us making mistakes, you know. Just punching down once or twice and going, ooh, that was probably too much. You know, time heals those wounds. It's just fake debate to me. Anybody complaining about a joke in this day and age, it's just ridiculous. I just have no patience for people like that. So I don't worry about it.
Yes, see, the thing also with Michelle is that to a lot of people, she's a new face. She's a fresh face. Even though I was on the New York comedy scene and I know her and she's known by most comedians in that world know who she is. Had maybe Seth Meyers or Wanda Sykes done that joke, it may have been a little different, but I feel like when you're the new kid in town, you're the freshman, you don't get to mess with the seniors. And I just think that people had a bit of an attitude about her too, because she's like, who are you? And then you get into this grand of a place and you think you're going to talk about us. Like, no, go sit down. I think that was part of it. Which
is silly because she was invited to speak.
Exactly.
White House course. That's what happens at that event.
Exactly. That's what you're supposed to do.
It's a roast. Right?
Yeah. It is, yeah.
Another thing that factors in, I'm curious to see for each of your perspectives, is how comedy has evolved in the age of social media. Because you get a lot of you get feedback a lot more quickly these days now than in the old days. Like, you know, I'm sure in the early days of The Onion, you had to wait for those letters to come in. The letters to the editor, one of my favorites. So, but now email, Twitter, Facebook, commentary, things like that. How do you feel that affects the way you've either worked on your craft or talking about what you would actually have in a film festival, depending on what's being said on social media?
Oh, you mean about the project?
Anything, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that social media has become a great tool for, if you're an independent filmmaker, is more of what I'm speaking to. It's a great way to get festivals to notice what kind of traction you're getting, what kind of attention you're getting. I mean, obviously, it's become a huge tool for independent filmmakers as far as just using it for your comedy. I mean, I think it's great. I think you can put things out there and you can see what gets attention. In the comedy world, it becomes sort of a gray area because you put something out there and then it's sort of free for the taking, which has become sort of a new thing of, you know, do I want to use this platform to test my material at the risk of someone taking it and using it as their own? But as far as my business as the Chicago Comedy Film Festival, I do look at what filmmakers and what people are doing with their social media to use it as a marketing tool, and I like to see how much they are able to use it as a business. You know, as filmmakers, we need to be advocates for what we're doing. We need to be able to kind of be our own voice and really get people on board. And I like to see if people are able to do that as well as be on the artistic side. So yeah, I think it's great. That's my answer.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a double-edged sword, actually, because on the one hand, it is great to be able to get instant feedback on written material. That there was never really a way to do that before. You could only do it in performed material, at an open mic night or whatever. Now you can try out a prose joke and get feedback on Twitter or whatever. The other side of the sword is if you publish a book, they're going to want to know how many Facebook followers do you have, how many people follow you on Twitter, and they're not going to do the book deal with you if you have 20 Twitter followers and not very engaged on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. So the industry, like you were just saying, for your festival, you want to see how people use social media. So if you're an introvert like me who hates Facebook and never goes on there, you're going to have trouble trying to get any traction with a project if you don't have a following of some kind. So it's not
I've definitely seen some of my Twitter jokes and Facebook jokes end up on late night show monologues, but they're typically a throwaway, something. I don't put my gems online anymore, but I have seen something. I'm like, wait a minute, that's my joke. And the thing now that social media has done is made comedy stars out of people that can think in that 7-second Vine timeline. So then when you are a person that really, has a premise and works up a situation before you get to the punchline, it's like, you got to be funny in 7 seconds now. It's like, no, I'm a stand-up. I'm a storyteller. That's not how my show works. People are also getting deals off of their Instagram pages. And I've been on shows with comedians that only have about 5 minutes worth of material, but they have 120 or 130,000 followers on Instagram. So they get on the show with you, and they can do 5 minutes, and then they have to leave the stage, and they don't have any real material. So I think it's making stars really quickly. People are really getting deals off of it. So I guess if you can use it to your advantage, do it. I know of 2 girls here in Chicago that got book deals from their Facebook pages, and now they have TV deals. One of them signed a deal with FX based off of a book that she wrote, and she's just that was great because she's actually a brilliant writer. But then there's somebody else that got a deal. I'm like, I don't know how they're going to pull this off because they really don't have the material. So I don't know.
Can I speak to that issue of jokes stolen? Because I think that's something a lot of beginners especially worry about. And you mentioned it too, ooh, is somebody going to steal my material if I put it out there online? And, the way you talk about getting material stolen, the way I feel about it, it's the way you have to feel about it. It's like, well, that's that one.
Yeah.
You can't complain, you can't sue, because then you're just pissing in the bathwater, and nobody's ever going to want to work with you. You have to take it in stride, and your asset is you can come up with more.
Yes.
If you came up with a good joke and somebody stole it, that's a good thing, because that means you're good, and you wrote a good joke. Keep them coming. Keep them going. Maybe save the gems, don't put all the gems out there, but you got to let that wash right off your back.
I would agree with that, and also, I think jokes get recycled. We think that we're writing original stuff, and if somebody else, there's always more material, so it makes you work harder.
Yeah.
It just makes you work harder.
Yeah, we used to do this thing at the Onion where we'd wait for everybody else to do their joke, and then we'd put out our joke on that subject, because we'd want to do the best joke that no one else thought of. So, it's our little thing.
But it's a good point, too. So, again, something for everyone who's considering, writing. Now we're getting to the part of not just where the humor is, but also where your own voice is, your own spin on a particular joke, or where you find the humor in those things. What are things that you use to kind of help you find your approach to it? So, like you said, you want to see how everybody else told that joke. Well, how is it that you find your approach then after that?
You want me to go first on that?
Sure.
Okay, so I struggle with that personally because, like I said, I'm an introvert and I see myself as kind of a blank slate who doesn't have a voice, really. I tend to channel my voice through, like you were saying, characters the Onion is a character. It's the classic archetype in comedy of the braggart captain fool. Think of Ron Burgundy or Ted Knight or Lieutenant Frank Drebin. That's the Onion. It's an authority figure that spouts nonsense. So I always try to find a character and then speak through that. Whenever I do a book, I like to often have it written in the voice of a character. I did a book on Trump, and it was kind of written by a Trump supporter. Doing a book now on Elon Musk, and it's in his voice. And that's kind of the only way I know. I did a self-help parody book once. It was called You Are Worthless, and it was just a bunch of insults and how horrible life is.
That book helped me a lot.
I got letters. People were like, I never laughed so hard. I'm not depressed anymore. But I couldn't get past me writing it, so I made up this fake therapist to write it by Dr. Oswald T. Pratt. And I got a picture of my friend who, going like this to put on the back. And okay, now I get it. Now I can write as that character. So
that's hilarious.
That's my struggle.
I think for me, if I have a voice, it's to tell the truth. I think the truth is always the funniest thing. And I try to write as truthfully as I can about a situation, even if it's going to uncover some things that we don't really want to hear about. And those tend to be the funniest moments. So trying to be funny or trying to get a punchline off, to me, I guess it can work for some folks. But for me, what is the truth in that situation? What's really going on here? And once I tell my truth and speak what's on my mind, it tends to end up being really funny. Most of the time. Yeah, sometimes not, but yeah.
Sort of piggybacking on that, I was going through a medical crisis last year, and this is just like something that always happens to me where I'll be going through something really negative, and then I think as a comedian, if you're writing comedy, you have the innate ability to find the funny and kind of to what you're saying, the truth of it. So I was like in line at Walgreens, and I was having this horrible day, and I looked down. I was dressed horribly, and I was just like in this horrible situation, and I looked down and I had a Cheeto in my scarf, and all I could think to myself was like, this will be something I write about someday. Someday.
Did you just stand there pathetically? And
I ate it. I did.
That's how you should have.
Yeah, but that's sort of like the voice you have to find is like, you just have to listen to those moments that you find the truth, like what you're saying, and also like what is funny, that an audience would watch that and just be like, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for talking about that weird situation and then just giving me something to connect with. Because we all connect through humor, and so it's really just finding your own perspective and how you find that humor in just shitty situations.
Those are always the best, I think, the
Yeah.
shitty situation.
Yeah.
With me, I would always find fried chicken crumbs in my bra when I took my bra off. But I remember making out with a guy, and he found the crumbs. I won't get too deep into the story, but that is something typically somebody would be so embarrassed about. But
I'd be like, where's there more?
Right, yeah. And then from that, I was living in New York at the time, and for whatever reason, homeless men would always try to talk to me, like holler at me, like get with me. And I never saw them doing it to other women necessarily, but it's something about me where homeless men, for whatever reason, I'm very gorgeous to homeless men. And then I put that in with it, they probably think they're gonna find a meal. So it made perfect sense that when you see me, you're gonna get some loving and some food. Whether I prepared for you or whether you found a chicken in my bra. But It started from a moment that I think most women would be extremely embarrassed about, especially if you're a larger girl. You don't want that kind of thing. But the truth of it is there was chicken crumbs in my bra. And
comedy equals tragedy plus time and or distance.
yes, I love
So
that.
you can always find it with pain. You can always find comedy in pain. It's a coping mechanism. If you can't laugh at it, you're in trouble. So
Pretty good. I usually find the Cheetos like right here.
Don't-
Yeah. Oh,
It's a shame.
let's open it up to our guests here. If anyone had a question that they wanted to ask, this is a chance to get your question asked. Otherwise, I'm just going to monopolize the conversation here. I have more questions about crumbs and Cheetos. I know someone's got. I know. Yes.
I'm a writer producer, and I finished a feature film that's in the festival circuit now. And there was one funny scene in the whole movie, and it was a physical comedy scene. I could not for the life of me come up with something else that I thought was funny. It's funny as that one physical comedy scene. So what is it that a person can do to stretch themselves beyond the safe, clever life, which is where I am, to the crossover to the funny or the hysterically funny?
all right, so I wrote a whole book on that. It's called How to Write Funny. And there are 11 different jokes. Just 11. And madcap is one of them, and that's the physical humor that you're talking about. And it's my favorite. There's nothing funnier than somebody falling or just somebody doing something physically clumsy. It's funny, you know? And there's almost no explaining why it's funny. Maybe we can relate to it, I don't know. But yeah, so there are 11 others. There's irony, there's hyperbole, there's misplaced focus, there, you know, I could go on. Meta humor. And when you start combining those things, you mix, character is one of them too, that's a big one. You mix those things together and think of them as like a recipe. And you throw in a little madcap and you throw in a little irony. You start experimenting, you get some really funny stuff. And however, for like a feature film, I think it's important to remember that the structure has to be dramatic. You know, you have to have a story. And the humor should be thought of in terms of scenes, you know, unless it's a really wacky, broad comedy. You don't necessarily want the plot to be funny. You just want funny things to happen in the scenes. So, yeah, there's a lot of different ways to do that. In a movie, character is probably the biggest one. And you want to use comedic archetypes for those characters. There are certain types that always work in comedy. I mentioned the braggart captain, but there's also the man-child, the woman-child. It's a grown person who acts like a child, always funny. Or there's the slob or the snob or the prince, princess, the jerk, the Lothario. These are certain comedic characters. Actually, just look at Warner Brothers cartoons. You'll see them all. Daffy Duck was the bumbling authority. Bugs Bunny was the trickster. Elmer Fudd was the dummy. The dummy is a big archetype. Just somebody who's really dumb. People love that. And often on a sitcom, there's the dumb character. It just never gets old. So, but you can also do the smart character. There's somebody who's like really smart and nerdy. So, yeah, there's a world of other humor out there besides pratfalls.
I'm going to get your book.
All right, good luck.
But speaking back to that, though, when it comes to physical humor in a piece, how much of that is going to be what you write, and how much is it going to be like the actor who's going to play that character?
Mostly the latter, I would think.
I'm sorry?
Mostly the latter. It's going to be the performance.
Because you have some actors who are really good at physical comedy. They get all those roles. John Ritter was excellent. People, he was able to do the timing, the pratfalls, everything, boom, boom, boom. But then there might be someone who's just not as good. So do you think about that when you're writing your story? Like, I might not get someone who's as good as someone like, they say, a Jim Carrey to play this role. How do you factor that in when you're writing something like that?
take that one?
I think, oh my goodness. I know I was always taught to put it all on the page, to write it there and get them to go your way. So whoever's going to produce this has no choice but to get the best for that. Don't leave any holes. I've never written a physical comedy scene, but I'm imagining he would have to be, it can't be, oh, and then he slips and then he falls. If you want it, if it's magical, it has to be written in that magical way so that they know, okay, damn, we only got 2 people we can cast for this, either Jim Carrey or whoever. But if you just write it like, they fail and some plates happen and then they fly out the window, then it's like, you're like, whoa, shit, really? I mean, anybody can do that. But no, if it's got to be like amazing and this big thing, I say put it on the page. I don't know if you can just get away with just a quick little one-liner, like, oh, and then they slip.
Yeah, I think it depends on if you're producing a movie yourself.
Yeah.
Or if you're writing a spec screenplay, or producers are going to have to read it and get it. If that's the case, spell it out. But I made a physical comedy movie, this movie Bad Meat, with Chevy Chase and a bunch of like Second City people, and there was a lot of physical comedy in it. But I knew I was going to cast those people, so I just wrote, he falls
right
in the script because I knew I had good people. Chevy Chase is like one of the best falling people.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, going off of that, I didn't have Chevy Chase in my film, but we've made some feature films, and we have used the same actors over and over. So after a while, you start to just kind of know their abilities. And if you're writing for someone, of course. But I actually personally have never really written a lot of physical comedy into my scripts. But yeah, if you're doing independent film, I think that if you're casting yourself, which I do a lot, then it's different than, trying to sell it. I think, what they're saying just goes right into that,
So I'm writing a scene, not a pratfall scene, right? But I've had these, and there's a scene, it's 2 characters, and there's an interaction, and there's the joke that comes from it. But it's like, it can go so many different ways. How do you refine that? How do you sit there and go, this is where they hit this line, this is where they get the inflection on this word, this is where I know we stuck the landing? Is it you going through it, writing it over and over again, going into your head, reading it to others, reading it aloud? How's your process on that?
I definitely like to let my characters play in my head for a while before I put pen to paper. I let them do different scenarios. I just let them live in my head. It may sound cuckoo, but I let them talk. I let them tell me, because it's their story. And I want them to tell me, what is the truth of the situation? How would this really go down? I just think letting the characters play and letting them be very honest in whatever their truth is will make for the funniest thing. Because I sometimes punch up scripts. People will give me things for me to put stuff in, and I'm like, they were trying so hard to be funny that it's not funny. So a lot of times I end up just taking jokes out, and I'm like, that's some bullshit. No, don't do that. That's horrible. Stop it. And then when you get it back, you're like, wait, where's my joke? I really had that big joke. And I'm like, and it was a mess. This is what will be, it'll play funnier this way. So let the characters tell the truth. Truth is funnier than fiction, to me, most of the time. Let them play. But I don't, I'm weird like that, where when I create a character and I know the scenario, I may let them talk to me for 2 or 3 weeks before I actually write it down.
Yeah, I don't think that's weird. I think that's
really okay.
I think that's the way that it should be done.
Okay.
I think you're doing it great, because if you have the worst thing in a comedy screenplay is jokes. Get rid of them. You don't want jokes. You want comedic archetypal characters behaving like they're supposed to. That's what's funny. So they are living the truth of their character. If somebody's a snob, just make them do snobby things. People will love it. If somebody's a slob, make them do slobby things. They'll love it. That's what they laugh at. And you put them in a scene with somebody, ideally somebody who's very opposite them. Put a snob and a slob in a movie. put Bill Murray, the slob, in a movie with Ted Knight, Caddyshack. And it's funny because there's contrast and there's conflict. And
The Odd Couple was a perfect example.
The Odd Couple, yes, perfect. Neil Simon was very good. He was very, very good. So, yeah, I would do the same. I would put the characters to work in my head, talking, and I would just have them have a conversation, but they would have to be true to their character. I know kind of who they are, so I know how they would talk. And then, like you said, I would play it out a few different ways. I'd write it one way. If it doesn't work that great, I'd write it out a different way. And keep going until I felt like I really nailed it. Kind of trying to discover the perfect scene.
Have you ever kept something in? Sorry to be the moderator for a minute. But have you ever kept something in that maybe you personally didn't think was necessarily that funny, but it worked? It's like it worked. And it's like, or do you just, if it's not super funny to you, do you remove it?
It depends on the movie. Like if it's a super wacky comedy that has to be laugh a minute, I might go for the funny. But if it advances the story, but it's not particularly funny, that's fine. Mm-hmm. Because in a movie, you don't want it to be so one note. You want some parts to be laughers, some parts to be criers, and maybe some part to be surprising. Just to keep people interested while they're watching.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
A lot of the films that we watch that are submitted to the film festival, especially feature films, a lot of the biggest mistake people make is that they write the whole film like talking heads. And the goal is not to write scene after scene of people just sitting around talking about funny things, which for some reason I think people think they have to do that in order to tell the joke. When in fact, I'd much rather just see a great story. Just a great story. And a perfect example is like, there was a film that we had about a couple, and right in the first scene they were getting a divorce, which sounds very dramatic. But just without any words, the guy was leaving. He was like, okay, I'm leaving. And it's very sad. And she starts to give him his suitcase. But then without any words, she just keeps giving him another suitcase. And then another one. And then she keeps stacking bags on top of them. And it just gets absurd. But it was so funny. I was crying laughing because they didn't have to say anything. It was just about, you felt that passive-aggressive relationship. And that was like the most important thing that they could have done. But yes, so many of the films that we get, I think are trying to tell jokes over and over. Just don't do that. Just give us a good story and just write characters that aren't even funny, just are real and have real moments together. Because we all have comedy in our daily lives. So just think about how much comedy there is with your mother, with your dad. It's all there. Just incorporate it into your story.
There's just to jump on that for 1 second. There's one of the best rules for writing is show, don't tell. If you've done any writing, education, you know that rule. Don't show people telling jokes. Show people acting out the joke or the comedy or the scene. Great advice. I was watching The Blues Brothers last night and realizing it's one of my favorite comedy movies, and they don't say much. He gets them out of prison in the beginning, and they jump a drawbridge in their old police car and drive through a mall in like the first half hour, 40 minutes of the movie, and there's not a whole lot of dialogue going on.
Yeah, it's very similar to Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, which is one of my favorite films, and growing up I used to watch it over and over because these two men they really love each other. They really do, but they just don't know it yet. And so you just want to find that love and just make it real and funny,
So when you first started versus now, how long would you say it used to take you to write a script from like treatment stage to like being happy with it versus like now? Just curious. To see if it gets any easier.
Does it get easier?
No.
I don't know if it does. It might get shorter.
I used to be really sloppy. Like I would just like sit down for like 2 days and just write it from start to finish, and it would be just a piece of shit. But now, like, I almost wish I could do that still because now I'm far more formulaic about it in the sense that I don't allow myself to just get it out. And I wish that I would do that more. because now I'm sort of finding that I'm being a little bit more meticulous, which is probably a good thing, but yeah, I don't have a good answer for you, really.
I started writing novels under a pseudonym, science fiction novels, and the same process. Like, I would plot them out, so I knew what the plot was. I didn't do a treatment, I just did like an outline, like a list of scenes or things that needed to happen. And then I would just do the shit draft, like just poop it out. And I would do as much as I could, as quickly as I could. And it's been really interesting. I've done 3 books like that, and they got easier and easier. And at first, for the first book, I would write the whole thing, and I would go back to that first chapter and read it and be like, oh, what a mess. I'm going to have to rewrite that whole thing. It would take me hours just to rewrite it. But it's great. Rewriting is so much easier than writing because it's already there. You look at it and oh, that's garbage. Just need to do this, this, and this. But writing from scratch is rough. But on the 3rd book, I went back and read the first chapter, and I had sort of gotten in the groove, and it was like, this is not bad. Like, just a couple of tweaks made me realize that's how Stephen King writes books. I know that from reading his book, On Writing, great book by Stephen King. He's been writing, so many more decades than I have. I think he can poop out a book with that first draft thing and just give it to his publisher. Seriously. And I think they can publish it, and it's not that bad. So I think it gets faster over time.
I think you should write a book called Poop Out a Book.
How to poop out a book.
Because the poop, you have to poop it out. But when somebody, by the time you give a script to somebody for punch-ups, it shouldn't be poop anymore.
It should be molded poop. Nice shape.
Nicely shaped poop.
Right. That's polished.
Polished poop.
And perfumed,
Polished, perfumed, and funny. Yes. But yeah, I think, because if you're the type of writer that's a perfectionist and you want it perfect the first time around, you'll stall and won't write and hold on to an idea and sit on it. And I've done that. And it's like, no, just go ahead and get it out. Just write it. No one has to see it. I think we feel this pressure also to have the final script so that people can read it. And it's like, no, it's nobody's business. It's your shit. Write your stuff. It belongs to you. It's yours. You don't have to share it until it's time to do so.
People sit on that for years.
Yeah.
You can't do that. You got to put them out.
Just let it on out.
Because your next one will be better. Your next one will be better.
Yeah, and actually, even just like writing, but also like we did our first feature film years ago, and we didn't know what we were doing at all. But I think it's always better to just do it. And I think it's easier to do that when you're younger because you like have no fear. And then you get older and you're like, well, I should really just, sit on that and really think about the sound issues that we had back in 2010. So I think that we should still be bold like that because don't be afraid to just write it. Just write it. Stop holding on to it. Just write it, make it, do it, put it out there. And if it's bad, at least you did it. I mean, we were just having this conversation. Like, I think it's always better to do something and write a full screenplay or produce a film than not do anything at all. There's so many people that aren't doing anything. And if you've even written a screenplay, you should just feel like a champion and be happy.
I'm going to throw out some really hacky advice. Ready for this? Could you walk really well the first time you walked? No, you were terrible at it, and you fell a lot. But you got really good at it. Same thing. The people who sell screenplays sell their 13th screenplay.
Yeah. I have a question about outlining. I'm a believer in it, but I don't know if this has happened to anybody else, but I'll do an outline, and then I'll start writing the script, and then the character takes over and does something totally different from what's in the outline. Can you relate to that at all?
And then you and the character fight and get into it, you stop speaking for a while. Yeah. I feel like it's the character's story. Let them live their truth. But I guess it's different. Like, I have a friend that all he does is write Christmas romantic comedies. And he writes them in that formula, and then he sells them to Lifetime or whoever. That's his hustle, is just doing Christmas-themed romantic comedies. And he has his formula, and this happens by page 10, this happens, and he never goes off the rails because he knows what works and he just does that. But I feel if you're really writing an authentic piece of art that you want, you know, you're a writer, you're an artist, then let the character, it's their world. Like, let me do my, how dare you not let the character live their life? Let the character do its thing. Because it's probably going to take you somewhere that's better than where you, the writer, want to go.
What's your favorite comedy scene of all time? Any movie or TV?
Way to finish it up. All right.
I guess I have two, but I'll do an oldie because I really love Bridesmaids. But I'm gonna go to Dirty Rotten Scoundrels when he's whipping him and he's sitting in that wheelchair. I don't know if anyone's familiar. And he's just, I can't think of the actor's name. The actor, does anyone know?
Michael Caine.
Michael Caine, yes.
And,
And Steve Martin's in the wheelchair, and he's whipping him, and Steve Martin's just, you know, smiling through it. If you're not familiar, sorry, but it's my favorite scene.
Watch that movie.
I have so many, like Ferris Bueller. Almost every scene in that movie is brilliant. Comedy, Blues Brothers, so brilliant. But my favorite has to be in a movie that I wasn't a huge fan of, but it was my favorite comedy scene. That's in The Jerk, Steve Martin movie, which is a movie that he had a bunch of jokes for and just decided to string them together. And it worked out okay, but it's not a great movie. But anyway, so he's an idiot, and he makes a lot of money, and he has people coming to him looking for handouts. And he's gullible, and he gives money to anybody. Any charity, he'll just write the check. You know, he's stupid. So this guy came to him. He had a lot of sob stories come, and it made sense. He was giving money away. But then this guy came to him and complained that he damaged the seats on his plane, and he just needed money to repair the seats on his plane. And he's just like this rich guy with a plane, just looking for a handout from another rich guy. And it's so funny to me because Steve Martin started crying because the story was so sad to him. The guy was like bringing the waterworks too. He was like this rich, you know, Southern guy with a cowboy hat or whatever. And he's talking about, you know, I take passengers on my plane. I had to put towels on the seat. You know, and it was just so stupid and funny, and it's like,
I don't know. I will say, damn it, I had one that I want to tell you all about. I would say that one of my trading places with Eddie Murphy, there's so many just in that alone.
It's this awful Negro.
Right, awful Negro. Everything in that, it's ridiculously done. But there's a movie, I was just sitting here and I was like, oh, I'm going to tell him that. And I can't think of the scene right now. Boomerang with Eddie Murphy. And there's a scene, they work at this cosmetics company, and what's her name? Grace Jones is this over-the-top diva, Strange, that they brought on to wreck the brand, and she's a totally different direction than what they were when they were with Lady Eloise. But she comes into this crazy leather outfit and acts a fool, and she throws her panties across the thing, and a guy takes her panties to smell the essence of Strange. But the way Eddie Murphy turns her around to play with her weirdness and get her on board with what he wants to do with the brand, that thought was genius. And I always think I want to write a scene like that where this crazy offbeat person comes in to destroy what's going on. And it's like Eddie Murphy playing the straight role for the change, and it really worked.
You keep coming back to Third Thursdays in Chicago because you are one of our new organizers, correct?
Yes, actually Brent Cato, my husband, but also
Brent
festival executive director. He'll be more of the head liaison.
So we thank Jamie for all the work she did, and just pass the torch. And before we leave, we just wanted to say thank you to Troy Pryor, who is in the building now. If you guys don't know, he's the head of creative writing. Would you like to come up and say anything? Not on the spot, but you're welcome. Well, he is a huge, hugely important person in the world of creating film here in Chicago. He's created Creative Cipher is his organization. And I know he's spoken with us before, but definitely a guy to talk to if you have a project that you yourself are going to be getting up and going. But otherwise, thank you all for coming out, and feel free to mingle. Till next time, too.
Thank you.
Every third Thursday.
Thank you.